Hi, everyone. It's 1 o'clock, so let's start. Welcome to the webinar, Adaptable Leadership in Times of Change. I'm very pleased to welcome Stuart Crooks, MD of HPC at EDF, as our guest today. Before starting, let's take a moment for health and safety message. Most of us are working from home at the moment, so it's important to think about how we are sitting and standing, that we are not causing an issue with our neck or back. Many employers are offering to provide office chairs or screens. You can always ask. I think it's good to think about a good posture that will allow to work more efficiently, with less fatigue and strain on your body. So please be aware of the good posture. It's a good first step. So why have we organized this webinar together? We've got 3 organizations here. We've got EDF, Lane4, and Thomas Thor. EDF first is, of course, one of Europe's largest energy companies. It's all home to many of the leaders and future leaders helping Britain to achieve a net zero carbon emissions. We've got Lane4, who is going to lead the discussion here with Austin. It's a management consultancy specializing in the field of people development and performance. Based in the UK, they have a track record in the nuclear industry, and they work across the globe with a wide range of organizations, teams, or individuals, helping them reach their potential and deliver exceptional results. So Lane4 purpose is to build winning organizations and improve people's working lives. I'm representing Thomas Thor here. So Thomas Thor, we are at the heart of attracting and recruiting the diverse leadership required to deliver the objectives in the UK nuclear industry. Thomas Thor's mission is building and sustaining the global nuclear workforce. So let me introduce you to our speakers today. I'm going to start by myself. So my name is Eve Guilloton. I'm part of the management team of Thomas Thor Associates. I'm going to be your moderator today. With a background of 12 years in recruitment, consulting and executive search, I have developed Thomas Thor activities in Europe, in Canada, and in the UK. We've got our guest today, Stuart Crooks, as a managing director of Hinkley Point C. He's on the board of EDF Nuclear Generation. And he started in 1986 as a control and instrumentation engineer and progressed up with EDF to lead the generation fleet and now to lead HPC. In 2019, he was awarded a CBE for services to nuclear industry. And to lead the discussion with us, we've got Austin Swain from Lane4. He's a co-founder and he has expertise in executive team facilitation, leadership and team development, leading change and developing resilient individuals. With a PhD in performance psychology, Austin was formerly psychologist to the England Rugby Union team and is an age group international triathlete. So what's going to happen today is that the interview will last about 25 minutes. I'm going to keep an eye on the time, on the clock, and then we will take some time for a Q&A at the end. Please send your question through the chat. The chat is at the bottom of your screen, I believe. And I will select some of the questions to ask Stuart and Austin during the last 15 minutes. So over to you, Austin and Stuart. Welcome.
Yeah, no, Ev, thank you. Great setup. Very, very grateful. And you've immediately getting me sitting up straight. So thank you for that. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And Stuart, good afternoon to you. Obviously, very, very grateful for your time here. When we spoke a few days ago, we talked about how the current world that we live in has impacted different businesses in different ways, and indeed impacted regions differently, as we know. But that said, we talked about it's a massively challenging time for us all. And there's a huge amount of transformation and change going on in your sector and adjacent sectors. So to get us going, I'm interested in what are the leadership challenges that you're grappling with in particular, and the issues that you believe leaders need to be facing into as a priority right now.
I guess, first of all, let's just reset the clock a little and go back to around February, Austin. So in February time, Hinkley Point C, 5,000 people on site, a very condensed site. employing many thousands of people across the UK, across Europe, across the world. That's where we were. We're heading up to 6,000 people in number. Where I am today is basically the delivery office. It's 700 people are based here. And every day somebody knocking on my door saying, I need more desk space, I need more desk space, we need more people. So that's the world we occupied. And in my role as MD, I've got to try and balance the shareholder requirements, the stakeholder requirements, and of course, the people, our teams, the great people who work on this project and their health, safety, well-being and their roles. So at the start of the pandemic, we were spending of order of not far short of £10 million per day of cash flowing out of this business. The shareholders have been very kind to us. This year we'll spend over £2.5 billion. Next year, about £3 billion. So when you actually work it out, you've got a massive, massive shareholder presence. And unlike many businesses, HPC is a business in its own right. You have a massive cash outflow of over 20 billions over 10 years. And then you have to recover that cash flow through the price of electricity going forward. So you've got massive, massive cash outlay in the hope that in 10 years' time, you will start to recover that. So not many businesses can withstand that level of the cash that needs to be driven by the project. So as the MD, you sat as the MD of this company, which is in its own right the size of a FTSE 100 business. So when the crisis occurred, and we were very excited on it, we have Chinese partners in our project who gave us lots of insight into what was about to hit. And to be honest, looking back now, did I really anticipate and really listen? So the first lesson for leadership is when you see these weak signals, you really need to understand what they're saying to you, how they're saying it, and what that impact will be on your business, not just on your shareholders, but your stakeholders and of your people, your teams. And most importantly, the impact it will have within the community in which you operate, because without their support, you can't operate. So that's where we were around February, March time. And then you're suddenly thrown into this crisis. So we very rapidly reduced our numbers from sort of 5,500 on site down to 2,000. We shut the office, people went to work from home. And suddenly things that were previously impossible suddenly became possible. IT solutions were found, innovation was found. And I just reflect back now that had someone brought a board paper and said, Stuart, well, it would be a great idea to close the office, a great idea for people to work from home, a good percentage of their time, and we can do it with less people, and we can simplify the processes, and we can do all of that in 6 months. What do you think? You can imagine the board meeting's reaction. The board would just say, you must be mad. You're spending £10 million a day of our shareholders' money, and you want to do that. Are you mad? But COVID taught us and taught me that the world has moved on. We're all shaped, Austin, by our own history. And the first thing it taught me, you have to break free from your history, because what I thought was impossible was a constraint on me. And the first thing you have to do as a leader is open your mind up to other ways of thinking. And being a truly diverse project as we are, having different nationalities working in the project side by side, day to day, different people from different orientations, enabled us to rapidly tap into this different thinking and create a new agile approach to managing and leading. Agile's used a lot in the words, and the traditional approach of an engineer is you have a plan A, you have a plan B, you have a plan C. They're all linear. Agile thinking is much more about saying people think in different ways, and the more diversity you can have in your executive team and in the board, the better chance you have of reacting to a very uncertain situation, which is what we were facing. So just some key opening thoughts there, Austin, to your question really about the importance of diversity of thought, diversity of action, but also the ability on the importance of having courage to make change happen.
Yeah, no, Stuart, loads in there. I mean, fantastic commercial context for us all to think, reflect on. And one thing I was thinking, your phrase there about being shaped by our history, and you talked about diversity, and obviously the social psychologist gets me thinking about, just the value of that, as you've described, because there are the perils, as we know, of groupthink. Whereas instinctively we are birds of a feather and we kind of flock together. But I think, as you've implied there, if we do that and there's a lack of diversity, then I think the quality of the decision making hits a ceiling. We're less likely to disrupt, let alone challenge. So I'm interested in some of the way that you overcame maybe some of the biases and how you actually embrace that diversity agenda a bit more, because there's lots in that, I think.
Okay, so a couple of things to chew on there. So I'm also the chair of the Working Parents Network. We have a network in the company, and before that I chaired the BAME network. And I chair them not because I want to give advice and guide people, it's because I want to learn. I'm quite selfish, really, is that it gets you in touch with the new world of thinking. So if you go back to my world, I had 3 children. I got married when I was 21. I've been married 36 years now. So when I grew up, it was me, Alison, the children. There was just us. We had no support networks. I worked during the day. Alison worked in the evening. We passed the kids in the car on the way home from work for me and the way to work for Alison. And that was just the way I grew up. And I thought, well, working parents, I've done that. Well, what's the problem? But by opening up my thinking to listening to the modern world of what's facing working parents today, it's a very different world to that which I faced. So I find the first thing with these networks is, of course, you can add weight to your sponsorship, but the first thing is an education process for me to get connected to the real world. The second thing with this working from home, never want to waste an opportunity. My daughter decided she was going to come home. She's 26, works in HR, works in selection and criteria recruitment. And she's just been completing her dissertation for a master's in occupational psychology. She's been doing part-time. And she was looking for a dissertation topic. So I thought, great, if you're going to live in my house for the next few weeks in lockdown, here's a challenge for you. Here's a title for your dissertation, which is the impact of home working and what personality type works well and what doesn't work well. That's the exam question. How do I get the best out of my people? And how do we get the best out of this project? So she reluctantly agreed to my demands, which I didn't think were too unreasonable. She was eating my food, she was living in my house, so she might as well do some work for me. And we worked on that together. She did lots of research. I looked at the research and we learned together. So again, a second point, which was opening my mind to a new world and using different materials and different approaches to educate myself. And that was very fascinating because I couldn't understand why home working for me just does not work. Yet I've got many people in my team who think it's absolutely fantastic. But through this research, I got to understand myself better. I got to understand my team better. By exposing my weaknesses to myself, it's actually helped a lot in how I can get the performance. And to give an example, so throughout the lockdown, my objective was to be present in the site. If I'm going to ask 2,500 people to turn up at work, I'm going to turn up at work. It's about leading by example. That's my value system. But in going to work, you see the leaders who are like-minded like you, who turn up to work. And in your value system, when it comes to appraisals, it comes to bonus systems, it comes to promotions, suddenly your bias takes you to, this person's doing a really good job. I've seen what they've done every day. This person is fantastic. You know what? I haven't seen this person. I have no idea what they're doing. So they can't be doing much work at all. So that's the bias you enter this with. And what it's forced me to do is to become much more outcome focused rather than input focused. So what matters and how you value people has to be more about their contribution and value brought to the business. Now, for a leader in today's society, that's very, very tricky to do because our value system is born out of sitting in an office, watching what people do every day, or sitting in a factory, watching people produce stuff. We now have to think more intellectually about how well we set those performance targets. How clearly are we asking our people to be assured of what they're delivering? And then how do we value that? And how do we evaluate it at the end of the year? And how we come to interview people and select people for the right roles going forward? Because it's a completely different system that I had to really work hard and think about. Is my bias is, you're in the office, you like me, therefore you're good. That's the wrong thinking. It's the wrong answer. Actually, some of the best work that's been done through this project are people I have not actually seen for months physically. I've seen them virtually, but not physically. And I've now learned to value much more the work they do. And the fact that if they're not in the office every day, it doesn't mean they're not contributing. Indeed, some of these people have contributed far more, been far more productive. And the new way of working now has enabled us to really think about reducing our headcount in the project from around 1,800 in our project down to about 1,600. So we can do more with less by enabling us to be much more focused on outputs, But at the same time, you have to change your value system and how you value individuals, and you decide how to promote and move people through their careers. It's much harder to do.
No, Stuart, again, there's loads in there, and I know that we're going to preserve time for questions because I know some of them are coming in, and there's loads of stuff for us to bite on. Thank you. I immediately reflect. You talk about your daughter there. I don't think you're right. You're probably not the only one, and we've all probably got loved ones who are still on the payroll for all sorts of reasons. There are benefits to that, but that research is fascinating, and it suggests about your learning mindset. And we at Lane4 talk a lot about adaptability, of which learning mindset is key, especially at a time now when we might default to what we know and what we think serves us well. And because obviously what strikes me, what you've said there about a learning mindset, it's almost like two parts. There's a drive to learn, but then also a drive to transfer. And I think it's both. And I was really interested, and I'm going to ask you a bit more about any other sort of biases that you've had to really think about, because obviously confirmation bias is a big one for leaders. Where we tend to pay attention to or interpret information in a way that supports our historical views. And it sounds like you've got in amongst that and really thought about those biases. Is there anything else that you've actually been sort of reflecting on and then changing action accordingly?
One question I was asked by one of the team members in the early days was to say, look, you're over-focused on the project, and when you think of the virus itself, it's a very challenging virus. It's a very serious virus. And overall, your natural intent is to protect your business. I think in the early days, we didn't do enough in really understanding how our people were feeling. Some people were feeling very vulnerable. If you think about the bias towards the end of the first lockdown period, people started to come back to work, started to come back into the environment, and I saw people who were genuinely worried about even exiting a flat. Now, my bias is, your bias is very much one of, well, people can read the news, they can do what I did and learn and educate themselves, but so why is it they're so concerned? Why is it they're so worried? And then you suddenly realize that actually you have very, very different personality types in an organization, and some people will take data points and extrapolate them in a certain way, which is not the same way as you do. People have the same data set and can get to a completely different conclusion. And your reaction is, well, but the data's obvious, it's fine. You can come to the office. If we haven't had any cases, it's okay. But that same data set looked through a different lens and through a different set of eyes, particularly associated with personality types, they can come up with a completely different picture. So what you have to do, and what I've had to do as a leader, is be much more empathetic to understanding people. And I pride myself on being an open leader. People will email me and ask questions as much as possible. I encourage that. And I was very grateful for one individual young lady who wrote to me, and she said, can we speak about how I feel rather than what you want me to feel? It's a very interesting sentence, that. Yeah. It's a very interesting sentence. And so I rang her up and gave her a call and said, right, tell me how you feel, and I'll listen. I'll listen to how you feel, how you're looking at this data, why are you concerned about. And you have to change your bias from saying, well, I'm the boss, I'll ask the questions, to say, you know what, I'm the student, I'm going to listen and I'm going to learn. Because this one person who had the courage to email me and say, can we have a conversation? I've just read your latest all staff email. That courage should be rewarded. It should be rewarded by me giving up my time to listen to what she had to say, and encourage and help her understand the situation and answer her questions. And she really did make me think. So I think mindset wise is data can be interpreted by the same different people, same data, different messages. And we just need to understand that what's logical and sensible through my eyes is not necessarily the same through others' eyes.
Yeah, no, Stuart, again, loads in there. Thank you. I mean, what strikes me about that, I think for all of us, is that this whole process has actually been very humanizing. Humanizing along the lines that you've just talked about, but humanizing because very often, at the moment, you and I are both sitting in offices, but I imagine we've all made lots of calls from our homes. So that in itself is humanizing, what sits behind us sort of thing, and then what's going on around us. What you've talked about there was about support networks and just how important they are. And I'm thinking about diversity of support networks, almost trying to join those 2 points up, because very often at times like this, the breadth of our support network can shrink, right? So I'm thinking about the diversity of your own support networks. Where do you go for support, and what does that look like for you as a very senior leader?
A very good question. I remember it was Sunday evening. I think it was the 12th of April from memory. I might be wrong, but it was that sort of second week in April. And I was really thinking about, as MD, you are responsible for the health, safety and well-being of your people, but I'm also responsible for the shareholders' money. And I'm also responsible for people's livelihoods. 5,000 people on site, many people travel to and from site from all over the UK. Many of them are hourly paid workers, and many of them live in difficult, challenging economic times, so they live week to week, month to month. And you sort of sit there and think, how do I square these things away? Because the easiest thing to do as the leader for me is to say, okay, let's just close the site and we'll wait till it's all gone and we'll start again. It's not my fault. Coronavirus is not my fault. That's the easy thing to do. If you put health and safety to the top right of the, and then you say, but actually, if you look at these statistics, and in many, from the financial crisis to Fukushima disaster to Chernobyl, and you look at the impact on mental health, well-being, economic well-being. So I read some research on that, and it's not that easy. You can't just say, I'll just close the site, because all you do is transfer that risk somewhere else. And by closing the site, you're putting people under financial hardship, you're sending people home with mental health illness. And I got to the point where I'm thinking, well, are the shareholders more important? Is it the people more important? Is it the livelihoods? Is it site? All of this data you swim around in, but ultimately people are looking up and saying, what should we do? What are you going to do? Government are helpful. They're very helpful in giving guidelines, but ultimately decision is your decision. Under Health and Safety at Work Act, under the law, you are responsible. So that was a very difficult time for me. And you say, who do you go to? I could go to my boss and say, this is a problem. He'll say, well, sort it out then. That's what I pay you for. That's not very empathetic. And he said, well, who else do you go to? I can speak to my wife, who's very empathetic, but doesn't really understand what I do. So I have to have a network of friends. I have a network of 3 or 4 friends, I call, who are professional friends, who I've worked with for 30, 40 years. I've been working since a long time, 40 years now. And I have a network of these friends who I've maintained. They're not sort of people I go out with beer and drink beer with or eat food with, but I know I can contact them. I can talk to them about my issues and my concerns, and I get feedback. And that maintenance of that professional network is really important. So there's nothing ever written down. I don't use social media. I'm sorry, I'm a dinosaur. I don't do social media. I haven't got time for it, but I do have a phone and I speak to people and I talk to them. And I'm very fortunate in my career to have worked with some outstanding leaders who still take care to look after me. So these people tend to be people I've worked with before. Some of them are my ex-bosses, some of the people I've worked in different industries, and some who are sharing the same concerns and problems. So that professional network is really, really important.
Yeah, no, Stuart, that's fantastic. I mean, I love that phrase at the end, that they have taken care to look after me. So thank you for sharing that. And what I was reflecting on is very often that diversity, you might have somebody who's your go-to as a sounding board. You might have somebody who's your go-to for sort of like unconditional positive regard, or you might have someone who's a go-to for a reality check or a shoulder to cry on, and if you're lucky, you get it in one place, but that's often not the case. And so that's a really, really great point. And then the other thing that strikes me is just that you've alluded to it a couple of times, actually, just how important listening is. Now you think, well, actually, as leaders, listening is a kind of basic 101 skill, but it strikes me just how, in this medium in particular, we've got to really, really work on our listening skills, because, there can be accurate, very often we can have surface listening, or we can have accurate listening where people go, oh, yeah, I'm understood. But then based on what you've just said, there's almost like another level with his empathic listening, where, wow, I've been listened to so well, they really understand my reality. And I think that's a really good point. Now, I've almost like got one final question in some ways before we go to the questions, because they've been flooding in. And you actually, again, you alluded to it, because you've talked about almost like the shareholder economy and the shareholder challenges you face right at the very start, right? But obviously we have a stakeholder economy where, you know, everybody is impacted, should be considered. Yeah, and you've touched on that, and obviously that's hugely relevant in the energy stroke nuclear. It's almost like by definition the broader ecosystem. And I'm thinking about purpose-led dimension to leadership. Any sort of perspective on that and its importance right now?
I think on that one, in this project, you know, I've been around nuclear for a long time, and you have to care about the higher order of things. So my first style, when I interview anyone for a job to come and work in Hinkley Point C, my first question is, you know, why do you want to do it? And what I'm looking for is a response which says, I understand why we're building this power station. It's not because it's a mega project and I want to tick it off my CV. It's not because it's going to generate huge amounts of cash for the next 60 years. It's not because it's technically complex. It has to be, the response for me I'm looking for is, I care about the purpose of what we are doing. We are building a facility that will help the fight against climate change. That's the higher order of why we're here. The second question I ask them is really to tease them about salaries, because people like that salary thing. They like to be paid. Yeah. And I usually say to them, look, you're not going to get rich working on Hinkley Point C. You will get rich in experience. You will get rich in purpose, but not necessarily rich in cash. And if you want to earn more money, then that's fine. Go and work somewhere else. I really don't mind. But you have to care to be part of this management team, the executive team, the workforce. You have to care about what you do. Now, of course, not everyone will sign up to that higher order purpose, but certainly at the exec level and senior leadership level, I only want to work with people who care about what we're doing. We're making a difference, and we're making a positive difference in this world, and we'll leave a legacy, which will be a positive legacy, and we'll do that extremely well. And that for me is purpose-centered leadership. I don't want people to come here for a year or two and think that's another little box on my CV. So the first thing I read on people's CVs is people think it's good to segregate every job every year. What I want is people who've done maybe 3 big jobs, who've really demonstrated their loyalty and their determination, even when things get hard. Because on this project, every day is hard, but the purpose is worth it. The purpose is worth it, and that's what I do. And that's why I put so much effort into developing the talent of the future, because it's developing the value system of people as much as the technical skills of people, and getting people to understand why are we doing what we're doing and why is it important. And if we can do that, I think we'll generate much more rounded, value-driven leaders as opposed to individualistic leaders.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's a classic quote, isn't it? If the why is big enough, then we'll put up with any how. So there's something there. And actually, you've touched on 2 things here about, you know, big psychological motivators. One is around belonging, which you've talked about. You know, belonging is an important psychological motivator, but as is meaning. They are important psychological motivators. Now, that actually is perfect timing, because on my screen, Eva's popped up, bang on cue. So, Stuart, massive thanks from my perspective. I'm still going to be around for the next 15 minutes, but Ev, I know you've got a whole bunch of great questions because I've seen them come flooding in. So I'll hand to Ev for now.
Yes, it's time for the next 15 minutes for the Q&A. So we received some questions from the attendees. One of the questions was, Stuart, when we come out of this crisis, do you foresee certain methods of working will change for good?
You know, the short answer is absolutely. You know, as I mentioned earlier, on the back of the crisis, we've decided to close this office I'm in today. So by Christmas, it will be closed. It doesn't mean all the people are going to leave. It just means that I'm determined not to lose the benefits that we've gained in the last 6 months. And we truly have gained benefits. If you look at recruitment as an example, if you say to someone, you're going to join this project, you have to live in the southwest of England, you have to travel to site, you're sort of excluding a whole tranche of talent. If you say to someone, I want you to work in this role, oh, by the way, you can do this remotely, you can work flexibly, you're suddenly opening up a whole new talent pool. So we are determined we're not going to go back. So the office has been closed. It went up to, I think we've got around 200 people in the office now instead of 700 people. So we're not going to keep the office open. So after Christmas, it will be gone. So it will force us to work in new ways. Some people will change offices, but I'm very much, you know, in the new world, as I said, we'll reduce our staffing by around 20% over the next 2 years. But the ratio of desks to people will be significantly different. So we're not expecting people to be in the offices. We're expecting people to work flexibly. Indeed, I've traded my lovely office here, which is about 8 meters by 6 meters, to a rucksack. So after Christmas, I won't have an office. I'm just going to have a rucksack and I'll go wherever I need to be, and I'll just work flexibly and lead by example. So absolutely, we've run a transformation program for the last 6 months to look at systems, processes, skills, IT. We moved to an upgrade of IT in the next few weeks to Windows 10, which enables much more interactive work. Huge amount of things. As one of my old non-exec board members, Cheryl Black, used to say, she used to say, Stuart, never waste a crisis. And I'm holding true to Cheryl's advice, never waste a crisis. And we'll come out better, stronger, and I'm convinced that people will have a much better value add to the company, and I think their life will be much more rounded and balanced as well. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's true for so many companies at the moment. I totally agree. So we got another question, a bit the same subject. Have you been training leaders in managing people remotely, which is a very different challenge when they are home based rather than office based? Is there a question from David?
The answer is yes. Training is a strong word. It's, training has a connotation of classroom, sit down, be told what to do, chalk and talk. So what we've had to do is develop innovative packages to work with you. And Carol MacArthur, who's our HR, well, she's the Chief People Officer, I think is the title, but the HR Director for EDF Energy, has worked really hard with the corporate team putting together a package called Alongside You. And it's a whole tools and training kit for any leader of where to go to for advice and help and support. So there's specific topics in there around how to manage mental health, how to manage welfare, how to do performance management, how to maintain connectivity, a whole toolkit of things. That's one thing we've done. The second thing we've done is we've introduced a thing called LinkedIn Learning. And through this toolkit, we get requests from people saying, I could do with help on X or Y. And we've developed specific digital training media through LinkedIn to help train our leaders on the topics that they need help with. So rather than a sheep dip approach of saying, you all need some of this, they sort of a pick and mix where they can do this interactively in their own time. And we find that's working quite well, because it's not like you're casting everyone to be the same. You're actually giving everyone the opportunity to be individual. And what I might need is not what you may need. It may be different things with different people. And then allowing people that flexibility by, in a safe area, say, look, I'm struggling with this. I really need some help with this. And then tailoring a package for those people is really important. And the final part is we found some leaders who genuinely don't think they can manage in this sort of world. It's so alien to them. They're really struggling with it. And it's, again, creating a safe environment for them to say, look, it's not your fault. It's different. What you were appointed to do is different to what we're requesting you to do now. So let's look at your skill set, and let's look at how we can balance your skills and make you comfortable in this new world. So it's not about punishing people, but we have to recognize not everyone will be comfortable with leading in this new model, and some will find it harder than others. But our job as a management team is to make them feel safe, contribute positively, and find roles that they can add most value to.
Yes, and feel safe. That's the big word at the moment.
And Ev, sorry, one quick thing on that you were safe. I think it's also really important to ensure that leaders create where it's psychologically safe to say that I'm struggling as well. There's just to build on that point of safety. Yeah.
The safe goes with the trust, and
totally.
The trust needs to be here to make sure.
Yeah.
We've got another question. What advice would you give someone in the nuclear industry looking to move into management in the coming years?
Advice. I'm never one for giving advice. I'm not good at it. But things to consider. In the nuclear industry, I firmly believe you have to be able to be a master of the technology. I think nuclear technology is special. We have to be the masters of technology, not to be afraid of technology. So the first thing is to have confidence in your own ability and your own technical skills. And that technical skills, I don't mean physics or engineering. It could be in HR and finance. It's a technical skill. So be good at your technical competence is the first message. And then build on that solid foundation with leadership and management skills. I've seen people in our industry think that management's management. It's not. It's built on a good, strong foundation of technical competence. And even now, my happiest days is when I'm dealing with C&I problems or control instrumentation problems or engineering problems. I love it. My team hates it, but I love it. And that's what makes me what I am. I am fundamentally an engineer. I love being an engineer. So you have to like the technology, you have to understand the technology, and you have to be technically competent. So my finance director, David, he's very competent in finances. I still expect him to understand a little about, if you get your job wrong, David, do you understand the consequence for this power plant? Do you understand if you overly zealous in cost cutting, what that might do to the project? Or if you're overly zealous in the message you send out about cost, what that could do to quality? Because we must always maintain safety, quality, time and cost. So the key issue here is you have to have an affinity with the technology. You have to understand the basics of the technology, but be very, very strong technically in your own field of expertise, and then move into management. Because if you do that, you'll be able to balance all the various different factors. So that's just some experience advice for me. But you also have to be self-confident and quite resilient as well, because it's a difficult, tricky thing. And the conversation we had earlier with Austin was around this self-belief that what we're doing is value adding. If you don't believe in that and you're frightened of that, then it's not the industry to be in.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. We've got other questions, but we are not going to have time to answer everything. Austin, is there anything you would like to add before we end the webinar?
Well, no, I was just thinking there's something about that. Actually, Stuart's very comment there about self-belief, and it's something about making certain, it's back to the support network, but ensuring that our thinking patterns aren't, should we say, self-sabotaging, because it's, because very often that the outlets for affirmation and am I doing really well aren't necessarily immediately there. There was one thing there that Stuart also said about resilience, and I think is really, really so important about certainly working remotely around the demarcations as leaders. So really make certain that people have demarcations on the working day and then demarcations at weekends, because we can easily blur into one thing which then can be a big predictor of burnout. And I think there is a really big thing. Stuart's been a great model of this. There's this whole phrase about every contact leaves a trace. Now, it's a principle of forensic science. The forensic scientists would say every contact leaves a trace somewhere. But I think right now that is so important, because when we're having conversations, every contact leaves a trace. And if you're thinking about as a leader, are you thinking that the interactions you're having, are they leaving a positive trace? Because those traces right now in the heightened pressure situations just sit with us a bit more. So if we're making certain we're leaving the conversation with positive traces, then that's just so important right now. So, and I'm just massively grateful for Stuart for being a great model of that over the last 40 minutes.
So yeah, I believe, thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Austin, for your time, expertise, for answering those questions. It was a pleasure to have you with us. And this session gave us the opportunity to reflect on adaptability as a core leadership skill. So we received so many questions that we didn't have the time to address, but we have recorded the webinar. So subject to our presenter's approval, we will send you a follow-up communication on it. So this concludes the webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a nice afternoon.